Hi, in this video we're going to be having a look at the A1 piece for grade 4, this Allegro assai by Benda. Tells you a little bit about Benda at the bottom of the page. It's always good to know something about the composer you're playing and have some idea about when it was written and where that kind of fits into kind of musically historical periods and that kind of thing. And if you know something about that, you'll know that we have something called the Baroque period that starts in 1600, finishes in 1750. Then we have the classical period that kind of takes over from 1750 and runs us into 1810, 1820, something round there. So you kind of see, where does Benda sort of fit into all of this? Well, kind of born during the Baroque period and then kind of lives into the classical period. So you might think there are certain things that are a little bit Baroque about this, certain things that are a little bit classical about it. And it's kind of worth thinking about that. In the classical period, there's a great emphasis on kind of grace and charm and being elegant in the music. And I think there's quite a lot of that going on in this piece. In the Baroque period, we often have music made up of short little ideas. So bum ba ba bum would be a very typical Baroque thing. Well, look at it, it's going on in this piece, isn't it? So it's quite an interesting piece because it's got sort of things that are hanging over from the Baroque period. It's got things that belong to the classical period. And just by sort of thinking about that a little bit, it's kind of helping us to think, how do I put the style of this piece across? We'll say a bit more about that in due course. I want to start off by thinking about, how is this piece written? In other words, how is it what we call structured? Why do we want to know that? Surely we just want to learn the notes. As long as we can play the notes and we can maybe do a few dynamics or something, that will do. Lots of people go into the exam room playing on that basis, and then they wonder why they haven't got the best marks. Well, you've got to kind of show a little bit more understanding and be able to communicate that in the way you play in order to achieve those higher marks. So it's worth just bearing with me, because music has to be structured, has to be organized in a way. And when we play it, we kind of need to understand what that structure, that organization is, if we're going to make musical sense of it. Now, when you have a look at this Allegro, you'll notice on the third line of the first page in bar 16, at the end of bar 16, there's a bar line, double bar line with dots either side of it. So it's kind of repeat marks. Now that's telling us something about this piece. It's saying bar 1 from the beginning up to bar 16 is the first section of the piece. So you can call that the A section, which in normal performance you would repeat. In ABRSM exams, we don't repeat where the repeats are there, but if you were in performance, you certainly would think about doing that. So that's the first section, what we call the A section. So the B section, the next section, must start after that repeat bar that you can see there. And so this is the last but one bar of line 3 on the first page. Let's look ahead. Can we see any more double bars or repeats? Well, the next one comes right at the end of the piece, doesn't it? So basically, this piece has got two sections. 1 to 16 is the A section, and then 17 to the end is the B section. So it's got two sections, and that's what we call binary form. If something's got two sections, it's binary form. If something's got three sections, it's ternary form. However, it's not quite the end of the story. We've got the A section and the B section, absolutely. But you'll notice the B section is longer than the A section, and you'll notice something on the second page if we have a look at this together. When you come on the second page to the end of line 3 in bar 45, you think, oh, that looks like the A section again. And if you look at that bar 45 to the end of the page, it's exactly as the A section was at the beginning. So now we're beginning to think, oh, maybe this piece is not in binary form, but it's in ternary form. So it's going A, B, A. First section, contrasting B section, back to the first section, to the A section again. That would be ternary form. Now, the funny thing about it is if you play this piece without the repeats, well, it's kind of ternary form because it's going A, B, A. If you play it with the repeats, well, the A section repeats, and then you've got a kind of B stroke A section that repeats. So you've got two sections, each repeating, which is a binary form. So it is a binary form because it's got two sections, but it's got this kind of sense of ternary form about it. Now, if you have two sections, like an A section that repeats, then a B section that repeats, but at the end of the B section, the A section comes back, we call this a rounded binary form. So the A section's got A, the B section's got B. That's binary form. If the A section's got A, the B section's got B, and then it comes back to A, we call it rounded binary form. Do you need to know that? Not really. But does it help you play the piece? Well, I think it does, because you're going to play your A section. That's kind of one mood. When you play the B section, well, there is some contrast in the mood, and we might have a think about how does it contrast. And then the A section comes back again. So you're going to try and make those mood changes between the A sections and the B section. That will make much more musical sense of it, where lots of people are just going to play the piece the same from start to finish. If you can make the mood changes, then you're going to kind of get the audience to understand the structure that Benda used when he wrote the piece. Now that's showing us that you're kind of much more advanced and more tuned in than the people who can't be bothered to do that or haven't had a chance to do that. Let's put it that way. Now, within these sections, there are also shorter phrases. And when you learn a piece, it's very tempting, isn't it, to start at the beginning and say, here's the first note, here's the second note, here's the third note, here's the fourth note, and you kind of go through processing every single note. You need to do that. You need to know what the notes are, what the fingers are, what the rhythms are. I'm assuming that that's something that you can do with the help of your teacher by the time you get to grade 4. So I'm not going to sit here talking about what note are we going to play next and which finger do we need and so on, because I think that's stuff that most people can do. I'm talking about how you really make a performance of your piece. So let's have a look at the phrase structure. Well, at the beginning, you've kind of got the first two bars, the first two measures. And then you've got another two bars or two measures. So can you see bars 3 and 4 have exactly the same rhythm as bars 1 and 2, and it's the same kind of musical idea. You know, we start the first bar, then we come down 3 notes. Well, what happens in bar 3? We start with a pair of notes and then we come down 3 notes. What happens in bar 2? We have this thing, notes a third apart, we go up 1, we come down. Bar 4, same thing, just a note lower. So do you see what's happening? 3 and 4 is the same plan as 1 and 2. The notes are different, the rhythm's identical, the musical patterns are the same. So we've got 2 bars plus 2 bars, but they kind of belong together. So you see how that works. What happens next is that we have a more continuous 4-bar phrase. And you can see and hear how that is in contrast to what we started with. We had this 2-bar fragment, the 2-bar fragment kind of transformed a bit, and then we've got a longer 4-bar phrase. Now, if you can play it in such a way that you can communicate that, it's going to sound so much better than just playing first note, second note, third note, fourth note until we finish the piece. Okay, what happens after that? Well, when you get to bar 9, can you see we're now going to repeat the process? Because when you get to bar 9, it's the same as the first bit. Yeah, so the first sort of 4 bars play out again. So we've gone back to the first 4 bars. So then you think, oh, I know what's going to come next. That bit we did at the end of the first line is going to come again. Oh, this time it's different. So when you look at line 3, we've got something new, a new 4-bar thing. Okay, So do you see what's going on here? We've got the A section, which itself chops into two halves. So you've got bar 1 to 8, and then you've got 9 to 16, where the first 4 bars are the same, and then the next 4 bars are different. So there's even a structure inside the A section. Isn't that amazing? So have a listen to that. I'm just focusing on the right hand so we can really kind of hear this. So from the beginning, 2 bars. Same idea again, same rhythm, but different pitch. A longer 4-bar phrase. Back to the beginning. Do the same thing again that we did at the beginning. Pair of bars, another pair of bars related to each other, then 4 bars different. Now, if you can communicate that phrase structure, hopefully you can already hear that that's going to be much more interesting for the listener, and it's going to help the listener to understand what Benda wrote in the first place. So I think it's really helpful to get hold of, well, sometimes you look at a piece of music and you can see phrase marks, you know exactly what's going on. Sometimes, like pieces like this in slightly earlier styles, it's less obvious, so you have to sort of think about it. By the way, when you come to that last phrase, you might have noticed in bar 13, I was dealing with those ornaments, what we call these appoggiaturas, leaning notes. So lean on your appoggiatura a little bit, those little notes. But you see what they do? They take half the value of the following note. So if you look at bar 13 and you look at the 2 little notes above, that's the editor, Mr. Jones, telling us, well, play that C appoggiatura as a semiquaver or a 16th note, then play that quaver B, that 8th note B, as a semiquaver as a 16th note. So we get groups of 4 semiquavers or groups of 4 16th notes. Hear how I was playing that? And I'm sort of leaning on the appoggiatura a little bit, so you see how that works. Okay, so that's how the A section kind of breaks down into phrases. Let's have a look at the B section. So we're now at that repeat sign in bar 17. Well, what's going on here? We've got a 2-bar phrase. What happens next in 19 and 20? Exactly the same 2 bars, all down a note. It's exactly the same pattern of rhythm and pitch, but everything's 1 note lower. And you consider here the keys changing. It's in E minor at the end of line 3. Then it comes in D major at the beginning of the bottom line. So 2 phrases in what we call sequence. If you have an idea that then gets presented a bit higher or a bit lower, but otherwise it's the same, it's called a sequence. So there's a sequence. So when we play it, we want to try and make that sequence obvious. So we've had 2 bars, another 2 bars, transposed as a sequence, and then we have another 4-bar phrase. It's just like the A section. That went 2, 2, 4, and in the B section we're going 2, 2, 4. So when we look in bar 21, here's a 4-bar. Okay, so you see how that works. So we've got the 2, 2, 4. We've got the sequence of the 2 and 2, and then we've got something different and more expansive, longer phrase for the 4. Okay, we've also got something slightly different in the character because the right hand is doing what we call syncopation. It's going off the beat. 1, 2, 1, 2. It's kind of snazzy, this, isn't it? It's like 18th century jazz. So you see what's going on with that. Okay. We've done those 4 bars. We come to the very last bar of the page and we think, oh, I wonder if this is going to do kind of what the big A section did and kind of repeat what we've just done again. But it doesn't. But notice what it does do is on the last bar of the page, it goes back to the idea that we heard at the beginning of the whole piece, the beginning of the A section. So we're in the B section, but we're hearing an idea that belongs to the A section. It's been transposed up 5 notes, and this time it's in the key of D, whereas at the beginning it was in the key of G. So what have we got? Do you see bar 1 was, And the last bar of the page, same thing, 5 notes higher. Oh, right. What happens when we turn the page? Oh my goodness, it's the same as it was before. Then, okay, we kind of sort of jump down the octave there, but it's the same as it was before. Then the next bit, we've got a 4-bar phrase that's transposed into this new key of D major, but otherwise it's kind of 13 to 16, bars 13 to 16. You remember this thing with the appoggiaturas? So this is a bit confusing, isn't it? Because we're now in the B section. We've had some new music, and then we're playing music that belongs to the A section, but it's in the wrong key. I think Benda's having a bit of a laugh with us, isn't he? But he's also trying to get his piece to stick together. And if you realise, oh, this is the same music as we had at the beginning, it's just in a different key. Well, are we going to play it the same way we played at the beginning? We probably want to make sure that it's consistent. We don't want it to be like with different phrasing or something. We might change the dynamics or something, but we want it to be played in the same kind of way. Okay, well, what happens next? Are we going to carry on with something we've heard before? Well, when you come to bar 33, we have something new, but it includes the syncopation that we were talking about in bars 21 and 22. So we get this. So this is a sort of funny tune, doesn't it, with all those repeated E's. So it's a bit less of a tune by contrast, isn't it? But we've got that syncopation we had in 21 and 22. What happens next? Well, guess what? When we get to this bar, 34, 35, 37, 37, 38, 39, 40, it's exactly the same as 33, 34, 35, 36, but it's all down a note. It's all transposed down a note. So it's another sequence. We were talking about sequence back at the beginning of the B section. So you begin to see how Benda is making his piece fit together by using ideas, either direct musical ideas, tunes that we've heard before, or kind of techniques that we've heard before. So this second line goes like this. We've got this phrase with the syncopated notes, lots of repeated notes, and then we repeat it all down a note. So this is what we call sequence. It's exactly the same, but just down a note. And then you think, oh goodness, what are we going to do now? Well, when you come to line 3, can you see we've got these appoggiaturas again? It's sort of slightly different music, but it's based on the music we had sort of 13 to 16 again, isn't it? Or maybe a bit related to what we had on the top line of this page, but the appoggiaturas are back. And then we go back to the A section that we talked about, and we do it exactly the same as it was at the beginning. So do you see what we've got? We've got this binary form, or what we're now calling this rounded binary form. And then within that, we've got these 2-bar and 4-bar phrases. We've got some sequence, we've got some appoggiaturas, we've got some syncopation. But do you notice how the same ideas keep kind of bobbing up all the way through the piece? And so if you can kind of be aware of all that, it really helps you to make musical sense. It's like, you know, when you read a story, maybe particularly, you know, when young people in school start to read, they read words, but they don't really think, you know, do I understand what I'm reading? They're just kind of reading words. So you could read the whole book, read the words, not understand anything that's gone on. You have to understand the story. You want to understand what's being explained. Well, this is what's happening here. We're trying to talk about what is the story that Benda is trying to say in his piece. It's not about, you know, one day I went shopping and I bought a bar of chocolate. It's not that kind of story. It's a different kind of story. It's kind of a musical story that doesn't particularly have words, but you begin to see, okay, I see how all this fits together. And if you can play that with that understanding, it's going to make a huge difference. So you see what's going on. You also see we've got some changes of key, like the A section at the beginning is all in G major. Beginning of the B section, we've got a D sharp, it goes into E minor. We mentioned that, didn't we? Then bar 19, it goes into D major. And it's quite a lot of this middle section in D major. That's no big surprise. It's in what we call the dominant key, a fifth higher than the original key. Lots of composers in the Baroque and classical periods did that. When we get onto the second page, bar 33, we go into A minor, so another key. And then in the second half of that line, when that sequence repeats, we go back to G major. Why are we going back to G major? So when we get to bar 45, we're in the right key to go back to the A section. So when you're playing it, have a little sort of think about these keys and just kind of feel when the keys change. That's something else that you could kind of notice about it. Notice when we've got syncopation, or we've got bum, ba, ba, bum, or we've got appoggiaturas, you know, these different ideas. Where do they come? And can we kind of play them the same way each time? Okay, so hopefully that's kind of making some sense to you. So I've focused on the right hand to try and explain that, but really most of the kind of melodic ideas, the tunes, if you like, are in the right hand, and the left hand is accompanying that. Sometimes there's a little bit of a conversation, like at the beginning. We have this dum ba da tum in the right hand, then it goes ba ba bom in the left hand, and then it goes in the right hand ba ba bom, left hand ba ba bom. So you can see how sometimes there's a little bit of dialogue, bit of conversation between the hands. Sometimes an idea starts in one hand and floats into the other, like bar 8. Where you start in the right hand, then you go into the left hand. But that just wants to feel as if it's one thing. Da da do 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 do. It doesn't want to feel like da 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 ba da da da. So it doesn't want to kind of bump in the middle. That's just one idea that's being shared between the two hands. So there's a little bit of that going on. So try to be aware of that as you go. Okay, in terms of notes and fingers, I'm sure you'll be quite happily working through that. I just want to spend a moment talking about chords, and this is mainly for the benefit of teachers, as I think by the time we get to grade 4 it's quite useful to know this stuff. If you're a student learning this and you're interested in chords and you know something about chords, great, stick with me. If you're thinking, oh, this is beyond me, absolutely fine. You can just skip this bit and come back to it later. Although there are one or two things that are interesting about it. Let me just go through chords, mainly for the sake of teachers. At the beginning, we've got chord 1 for 2 bars. Then we've got chord 5 for 2 bars, 5, 7. So chord 1 answered by the dominant 7th chord. So that's another piece of movement going on between those two 2-bar phrases. It's also useful to think that's quite a slow harmonic rhythm. 2 whole bars of one chord, 2 whole bars of another chord. Then the harmonic rhythm speeds up, because in bar 5 we go chord 1. There's a sort of implied 7 in first inversion. It's a little bit iffy. Chromatic decoration in the right hand. 1 in first inversion. Chromatic decoration in the right hand going to 4. And those chromatic notes, in other words, notes that don't belong to the key, they're little colourings, aren't they, that you just want to be aware of. So that they just come through. They're not just played as if, well, what else could it be? They're slightly surprising notes. In bar 7, we get very fast harmonic rhythm. So we get a chord on every single quaver or every single 8th note. 5, 1 in first inversion, 5, 7 in first inversion, 1, 5. And that's leading us to a cadence. Beginning of bar 8 is an imperfect cadence. We often speed up harmonic rhythm, the speed of chord change, on the approach to a cadence. That's what's happening there. In bar 8, it's all chord 5. So we're slowing down the harmonic rhythm again. Then we kind of repeat our way through all of that again. Just when we get to bar 13, well, okay, it's chord 1, implied 7B, chord 1 in first inversion, chord 4, then it's basically 1 in second inversion, 5, 1. And that bass line, very typical of Baroque and classical music, dominant, dominant an octave lower, tonic, hot, cross, buns. So kind of useful things to look out for. So you've got a cadence at the beginning of bar 8, cadence at the end of the A section. Okay, going into the B section, we're moving into E minor, chord 1 in first inversion, kind of going on to a 5 in second inversion, but there's also a 7/6 suspension. This E prepares a suspension, and then when the left hand moves to F sharp, that's a dissonance. It's a 7th that moves on to a 6. So that's a suspension. We come back to chord 1 in first inversion. Then, of course, this is sequence, so we're in D major doing the same thing. 1 in first inversion, 7/6 suspension, going back to 1 in first inversion. Then we're going to use chord 2. There's a passing note there. Dominant 7th first inversion, dominant 7th root position. 1, 4, 5. So that's an imperfect cadence. Then chord 1 in the key of D. And then that's going on for 2 bars as it did at the beginning. Dominant 7th. So that's all mapping from the beginning. And then we've got the same kind of pattern we had before. 1, implied 7 in first inversion, 1B, 4, 1 in second inversion, 5, 1. Notice the bass, heart, cross, buns, going to a cadence. Then second line, we go to A minor. This is a dominant 7th first inversion, 1. Then it alternates, 5/7 first inversion, 1, 5/7 first inversion, 1. So that kind of insistent alternation of 2 chords. Playing out again for the sequence on the repeat in G major, second half of the line. Dominant 7th first inversion, 1. Dominant 7th first inversion, 1. Dominant 7th first inversion, 1. Going on to the appoggiaturas on the next line, bar 41, a kind of 2 in first inversion, 1 in first inversion, 7, kind of 7/7 or 7 in first inversion, 1, and then 1 in D. Well, this was 1 in G at the end of 42, if you like, or it's 4 in D, but it's got a C natural there, isn't it? So it's kind of really back in G. Then we've got kind of moving to D, so this is 1 first inversion in D, then 7 in first inversion in D, going to 1 in D, but it's also 5 in G, and when you get C natural in the left hand, it's pulling us back to G, and then we go back to what we had before. So that was mainly for teachers, but there's stuff in there for students as well. Kind of working out which key we're in, how we get from one key to another, what's the rate of chord change, the harmonic rhythm, all things that are helping us to understand what's going on. When the chords change quickly, there's a kind of new energy in it. When they change slowly, there's a kind of breadth about it. So that's a good thing to kind of get a hold of as well, isn't it? And things like those chromatic notes that we talked about at the end of line 1. Okay, well, I hope everybody can come back and join us if you skipped all that, but if you've followed it, there are things that you can pick up from it, even if you're not quite tuned into what I'm saying about all the chords. Notice patterns, like in the first bar, the right hand, spelling out a G major chord, G, B, D, the left hand picks it up. So you can see certain chords. The third bar is a D major chord, the left hand picks it up. When you come to the last 2 bars of the first line, notice the right hand keeps coming back to G. G, G, G. It's useful to have anchor points. And notice the lower notes are going up a scale. B, B, C, C sharp D, D sharp E. If you can see patterns like that, it's kind of really useful, isn't it? Just to kind of get hold of ways of remembering it, actually, and just things to remember when you come to those bits. So it's something to hang on to as well as something to paint in the music. Okay, watch out for dynamics. So obviously you've got this A section is kind of forte, so it's a bold start. It doesn't mean it's all exactly the same all the way through. You've brought a bit of rise and fall. Tum pum pum yum tum. I would suggest, because it's 2/4, thinking the first beat is stronger than the second beat is not a bad idea. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2. So we're not getting equal emphasis on every single beat, which makes it feel heavy, ponderous. So that gives a bit of lightness. We get lift on the second beat of every bar. I don't mean thump all the first beats, but it's a bit subtle, but just lean on the first beats, be a bit lighter on the second beats. It will help the phrases to move on with a bit more shape and direction, and the whole piece generally to move along without feeling it's plodding from one beat to the next. So watch out for dynamics, then use the meter, the 2-time, to think strong, weak, and that will give you a little bit of rise and fall in the way you're doing phrases. There may be places where you think, actually, I could do a bit of a crescendo, just use your musical imagination. Last 2 bars of the first line, we're kind of building up, aren't we? We got going up to this point. So you might think, I'll crescendo here. Peak here, and then come back again. And then I can start again. You see, so you can give it a little bit of rise and fall. Don't worry, people will be saying, oh, it doesn't say crescendo in the music. Doesn't matter. If you're delivering the dynamics and the phrasing, but you're then injecting shape into the music, that I can tell you for nothing will get you extra points in the exam room, no question. And why would it get you extra points in the exam room? Because it would kind of make a more meaningful performance of the piece. It's you putting your own stamp on it, in addition to what the composer said. It's you inviting the audience into the story of the piece, rather than just saying, well, it all says forte, so every single note's equally forte. So doing the dynamics, giving a bit of shape in the performance, really, really good. Balance between the hands. At the beginning, you might say there's a conversation between the hands, so maybe it all wants to be much the same. When you get to the end of line 1, there's a kind of interesting tune and rhythmic activity in the right hand. The left hand is just supporting it, accompanying it, climbing a scale. Left hand could be a bit quieter than the right hand, so it can come and go a bit. Sometimes the left hand wants to be a bit more prominent. Sometimes it wants to back off. So that's what we call balance. See if you can be really subtle in the way you organize all that. Try to deliver the phrasing when it's written. Create a beautiful sound. So just because it's loud doesn't mean bash the piano. It means produce a strong tone, but one that's really attractive to listen to. Try to keep a grip on the rhythm of this, particularly control of semiquavers. I can imagine that maybe things like the end of line 3. Things like that, people are going to maybe find it a little bit difficult, especially as you're on weak fingers, 3, 4, 5, 4, 3. That will be a little bit lumpy. People do things like that, but just make sure they're nice and even. There's lots of little figures like that, aren't there, where we need nice, even semiquavers, so even rhythm, even in tone, so we don't kind of go a bit jellified on the weak fingers or we start thumping the thumbs a bit. That's all going to help us control, or will impact on the quality of your tone as well, and keeping it rhythmic. So, you're not rigid with it, but we're feeling the pulse. 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1. So it's kind of boldly progressing with the pulse all the way through. We haven't got bits that are rushing a bit, slowing down a bit. Things like quaver 2 semiquavers, or 8th note, 2 16th notes. Some people will probably rush the first note, dum ba da dum, yum ba dee dee. Just make sure we're doing that absolutely in time. There are all sorts of things in the rhythm that could run away. Things like this on line 3. Some people will get faster as they go through this. But keep it steady. 1, 2, 1, 2. So we're really under control there and not letting it run away. And remember, if you have a tendency to kind of get a bit faster, let things run away a bit, when you're nervous, which inevitably you are when you perform, these things get worse. So if you run away when you're practicing in performance, you'll probably run away even more. And then before you know it, things start to go wrong. So kind of really controlling this pulse is important. Okay, well, lots of different kind of ideas on how you might go about that piece. But what I've really tried to get hold of is, what did Benda put together when he wrote this piece? So that you can think about that and then think, how can I play it in such a way that's going to bring Benda's structure, the overall structure to life, bring those individual phrases to life. How can I present it in phrases, in musical sentences? How can I then do all these musical things that we've talked about? And that's going to enable you to capture the style that we started talking about, this kind of bit of Baroque style, bit of classical style, little musical ideas, motifs, you know, yum pa pa bum, or da 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 dum, or these appoggiatura things, ya da dee dee do 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 do, you know, little syncopated ideas, you know, kind of short musical motifs, alongside the kind of elegance and the grace of the classical period, which we've got plenty of in here as well. So I think actually, if you apply your musical imagination to that, you'll end up giving a really good performance of Benda's Allegro assai. I think it's a lovely piece, well worth playing, and I hope you have lots of fun and really enjoy learning that piece.